Welcome to Calculus again. So today we are looking at how to use technology to look at limits. So what is kind of special about this is that we are allowed to use the TI-83, TI-84 graphing calculator in order to be able to look at some of the properties in calculus. This is not the case when you get to university. If you're going to the University of Manitoba or U of W, they do not allow any sort of calculator use. So if you are planning on pursuing calculus at the university level, I don't necessarily recommend that you rely on it super heavily. I recommend that you spend a lot of money on it. We have some at the school at Windsor Park that we can lend you. So if you just pop by or shoot me an email and let me know that you want to borrow one, that's probably our best approach to that. And I'll walk you through the steps. The ones that we have at the school are a TI-83, which again looks like this guy here. So a little bit of a boring black brick. You'll see that the buttons look a little bit different than the ones on my screen here, and that's because the one on my screen is a TI-84. It functions pretty much exactly the same, it just looks a little sleeker. So again, when I walk you through the steps for this lesson, just know that they are the same for your TI-83 as for this screen. If you're in our class OneNote, if you click on this link right here, check out this document for steps. That'll take you to a PDF that has some slides just walking you through how to enter in everything, so you can follow along there, or again, watch this video. So we're looking at the same question as we actually saw last lesson, just for some continuity purposes. We don't need to do anything new. What it does is it lets us kind of play around a little bit with our settings, and it just generates some numbers for us a little bit faster. So to start, whenever you're looking at any question, if I was asked to find the limit of this at x is approaching 3, because we know that that's one of our non-permissible values, so it makes it a little interesting. What I do is I go second function and y equals, oops, sorry, not what I do. I go to just y equals, and I want to enter this in. Our variable button is this one right here, so x, t, theta, whatever. That is our variable button, so I'm going to use that whenever I want x, not the alpha x option that we have down here. Okay, so I'm going to go in brackets so that it knows it's all in the numerator. X squared minus x minus 6, close brackets, divided by, and put brackets around my denominator as well, x minus 3. And I've got my equation in there. Now I could hit graph, and I will get a picture that looks like this. That's great. It misses my hole completely. But otherwise, it does give me a pretty good picture of what my graph looks like. So even just generating that graph should let you calculate your limit pretty quickly. So going here and going x equals 3, and I know that that tick is x equals 3 because I go to my window and I see that it's a scale of 1 on my x-axis. Now, if I go to my graph and I'm like, I can't really see it that well, I can zoom in. And so zoom to is zoom in, and I can choose my spot. So if I use my arrow keys, I can go over and up. I can go over some more if I want to zoom in there. And again, we're seeing, but we see that that hole really isn't apparent. So that's the kind of downside to our graph function on our calculators, is that it's going to miss some of those key details, like holes on a graph. But I can also go to table set, okay? And if I want to start at maybe 0, or maybe I want to start at 2, or 2.9, and I want to go up by maybe 0.01. Enter again. And you can see what's happening already in the table. You obviously can't access this. This is all you're seeing on your screen at this time. The independent, I'm going to turn it into ask. Okay. And what that does is that it really kind of adjusts. I could control this setting. So again, if I go back to auto here, it automatically populates my table. So when I go into my table on my screen, I would expect it to already be filled in. Okay, but because, again, limits, we want to kind of control what's going on and get closer and closer and closer. This isn't going to quite do it because it's getting us closer, but not at a rate that's really, truly effective. Like, we're going to have to scroll through a lot to get a good picture. So instead, if I go ask, then when I go to my table, so second function table, I can enter in a value. So I can go 2.9, and I can go 2.99. Enter. 2.999. 2.9999. Okay, so and it allows us to get those y values without actually having to figure anything out. So you'll remember that we can also go on the, we could type in the exact value, and again, we should get an error. And we could go like 3.0000. And that gives us 5. Okay, 3.0001. Okay, and so we can kind of see it like it's trying and trying and trying to get close to 5. And so by putting so many zeros in, it actually gives us a value, even though it technically wasn't allowed. So it doesn't show all those decimals that I had entered for the previous one. If I go back here, I can see that I had entered in that 1 at the very end, so it is approaching 5. So that's the benefit of using technology. Again, getting that graph is not a bad thing. If we reset our window, okay, so the default is at -10 and oops, -10 to, That's really interesting. Why is it not letting me do that? Oh, it's having an issue with that. Subtracting, which shouldn't sign, that's what's going on. You have to use this negative button. Sorry, I was using my keyboard here. So subtract, instead of subtraction, don't press this. Remember, always press the negative sign. And then I can enter 10. And my Y max and min are going to be similar. So hit enter to get down to them. And I'm going to use the negative button, 10 and 10. There we go, back to a better view of my graph than I had previously had here when I had zoomed in. So that's what we're looking at. If you go back to your y equals screen to enter in another graph, there's a couple different things. If I wanted a different function, I could make sure that I have it entered here. So if I wanted that other question we worked on in our previous lesson, we could have 1 divided by x squared. And see how the equal sign is highlighted? That's how I'm going to know that it's going to show up on my graph when I hit that button. If I don't want it showing up on my graph, then what I'm going to do is use my arrow keys to move over to the equal sign. I'm going to hit enter, and now that equal sign is unhighlighted. You can also go over to this spot before the Y, and you can choose to make it a thicker line. You can make it shaded above if you're looking for inequalities, or below. Okay. Or you can have specific points showing up on your line too, or just points, or a dotted line. Okay, so lots of options. So I'll show you what this looks like if we have 2 lines plotted. It takes a little longer to function because the calculator has to think a little more, but if we hit graph, it'll put that first equation on, y1, but it also shows y2. I'm gonna reset my window because I wanna show you one other kind of problem to do with technology here, and that is when I'm going to set my y values 0 to maybe 100. I'm going to put my scale at 10 just so that it's a little bit easier to read, and I look at the graphs now. So that's my y1, but focusing on my y2, that 1 over x squared, which this didn't update here. Go back. There it is. Okay, 1 over x squared. I should have an asymptote here, but if I look at my graph, it doesn't look like I have an asymptote there. And I can zoom in all I want, and it will still cause me the same problem. So maybe I only go, so my x max, or minimum might only be like -2, because I really want to zoom in. Oh, right. It's the problem with using this on my computer. Okay, -2. Enter. +2. I'm okay with a scale of 1 there. But maybe my y max, I'm only going to go up to like 50 here. And that's fine. Okay, so if I look at this graph now, again, that's my y1. I don't really care about that. Okay, so when I'm zoomed in, it looks like it does stay away from my asymptote, but as I change that y max, to draw that graph, you just have to be careful, because eventually you'll get far enough out, if you also were zooming out from the x values, to make it apparent that it kind of looks like it does cross in that bell shape. So again, if I zoomed out to -10 and +10, where it was apparent that there was an asymptote before, now it looks like there isn't. That my graph kind of just creates that hump. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Asymptotes don't show super well on here. Holes don't show super well, so those non-permissible values. So you still gotta use your brain, use your knowledge of algebra to know where they are. But otherwise, technology is a pretty advantageous thing when looking at limits, because it can generate that graph and it can generate that table for you all you want. So if you have any questions about using technology, if I'm really well versed in the TI, TI-84, TI-83 world. If you get into the higher ones that are way more high tech, or if you use a different brand other than Texas Instruments, I might not be as helpful. You and I together might have to Google some stuff in terms of how to do different calculations as we go through this course. But I will do little featurettes on how to use the calculator every once in a while, because you are allowed to use it on the exam. And especially since there's some pretty crazy time restraints on that first section of the exam, I do recommend being able to use your calculator for it, even if you can't in your future courses. So I will post this video, and good luck with the calculators.